are these people?
So yeah, I think we can go into it now. I think this is good a time as any. So I did mention this to you guys off screen, but I'll mention it here. And those of you who saw this maybe a few weeks ago, I'm sorry, but I think in this case, it's well deserved to watch again. So obviously in light of the tragedy, the first thing I kind of thought of immediately was the need for Medicare for All for East Palestine residents. And if you don't mind going to the screen.
No. This one right here.
Yeah. So this is, so those who know this already, but those of you who don't, this is Libby, Montana, which is the only town in the United States that has Medicare for All in light of a tragedy they had during the Obama era. And I said via tweet shortly after the tragedy, come on, yeah, I would take Marianne Willis more seriously if she demanded that all the residents of East Palestine are entitled to Medicare for All under Section 1881A of the Social Security Act. She has been around people who have mentioned this to her, and she has yet to make this point. And I mentioned Marianne in this case because, as you know, she is running a challenge against Joe Biden, and she is an advocate for Medicare for All. And I know personally she is connected with people that you also know who are activists for Medicare for All on a national level, and I'm sure they have mentioned this to her. And on the next slide, where actually Medicare for All tweeted this out, they tweeted out, as part of the ACA, which is ACA, Libby residents who were exposed to hazardous airborne asbestos from a simulate mine from the WR Grace Company were made eligible for free Medicare at the discretion of the Social Security Administration and the DHHS. It was then codified in Section 1881A of the SSA. The language of the statute refers to any individual subject to an environmental exposure. COVID-19 is an environmental hazard. So this was mentioning in regards to COVID-19, but immediately my thought was, you guys deserve this. And I find it kind of surprising that no politician has mentioned this. So I do want to play for you, and I hope this can be a way for you to take back to the residents of East Palestine as a way that this is something that they should be advocating for, and loudly. I did want to play this video. So this is from A More Perfect Union. So this is kind of goes into details of how they got Medicare for All for their town. And then we can discuss it from there.
Sure.
This is Libby, Montana, the city of eagles, famous for, well, not much according to former Montana Senator Max Baucus.
Most Montanans don't know much about Libby. Most Montanans never been there.
But there is one distinguishing feature of Libby, Montana that you won't find on any welcome sign or brochure. It's the only town in America with Medicare for almost all. What does that even mean? Well, I went to Libby to find out how residents became eligible for Medicare regardless of their age, what impact government-provided healthcare coverage has had on the community, and what the rest of the country can learn from the town's experience with a single-payer healthcare system. Or as close as anything we have to it in the US. So stick around. This is The Classroom from More Perfect Union.
The single payer is not going to get even to first base.
The year is 2009. The Affordable Care Act is being crafted, and Senator Max Baucus emerges as one of the chief opponents of a single-payer Medicare for All system.
Is Senator Baucus open to your ideas? He's not.
To a single-payer idea? Not in a million years.
But behind the scenes, Senator Baucus was writing a provision into the signature healthcare law that would make one tiny town in Montana the only place in the United States where every person, regardless of age, is eligible for Medicare.
So the Medicare has been a godsend for me.
It's helped me tremendously.
It's been the best thing to happen to Libby. And none of it should have happened. I mean, this is the thing.
So we finally brought some justice to the people of Libby.
To understand why the town needed justice, I have to rewind a few more years and give you some backstory. Libby is the site of one of the worst man-made, corporate-perpetuated environmental disasters in American history. This is how the story goes. Libby was the site of a vermiculite mine. The extracted ore, sold under the brand name Zonalite, was used for all sorts of things. What wasn't widely known for the decades the mine was in operation was that, though vermiculite itself is harmless, it was contaminated with tremolite asbestos. It was later revealed that W.R. Grace, which owned and operated the mine for decades, knew about the danger to workers.
It didn't happen to us, as anyone would like to say. It was done to us.
That's Gayla Benefield. She's
the Aaron Brockovich of Libby.
And that's her daughter, Julie Johnson. Gayla wasn't feeling well while I was in town, so I caught up with her by phone.
Julie called you the Aaron Brockovich of Libby, and that is the best.
Yeah, but she's taller. She's taller than I am. The only way to describe it is it just pissed me off.
Gayla's father, a miner, died from lung disease. Her mother also died from lung disease. And Gayla won one of the first wrongful death suits against Grace over her mother's death.
Grace had bought the company. They bought the company with people knowing they had lung problems. They gave them chest x-rays every year to watch their lung capacity go downhill to see how long they could actually work a man up there before it showed and how long before he died.
So the company knew about asbestos exposure, was monitoring the damage on workers, and instead of telling people, they just tried to figure out how much work they could take out of a man before he died. W.R. Grace closed the mine in 1990.
The W.R. Grace company had a volunteer medical program, but they had a bar of getting access to care that was quite high.
That's Dr. Brad Black. He helped lead the Center for Asbestos-Related Disease Clinic in town, which screens and monitors community members for, as the name suggests, asbestos-related diseases.
And so a lot of people that were having significant health problems from their exposure weren't getting on the health plan.
And then they turned around within 2 years and went bankrupt on us, and we were left holding the bag.
I think Senator Baucus understood that before long, they're going to pull everything. There won't be anything for anybody.
And that brings us back to 2009.
Now is the time to deliver on health care.
As senator from Montana, Baucus was aware of Libby's issues, and as chair of the Senate Committee on Finance, he had the means to do something about it. And that's where Section 10323 of the Affordable Care Act was created.
It is one of those instances where you just, man, oh man, it's clear what had to be done. You just do it. You don't worry about bureaucracy. You don't worry about cost-effective analysis. You just do it because otherwise people are going to die.
Section 10323 basically gives people in Libby and the surrounding area benefits that nobody else in the country has. For one, it opens up Medicare access for those affected by the asbestos exposure, regardless of their age. And that can be a life changer for people like Julie. Julie was 46 when she was diagnosed with asbestos-related disease. She's been on Medicare through the Libby exception for about 10 years now.
I had no insurance at the time. Yeah, when I got diagnosed, the only good outcome of it was, yes, I did get on Medicare. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia in probably 2003, 2004, so I had no insurance to pay for any medications with it. Once I was able to get on Medicare, I was able to get the treatment that I needed. I was able to go to the doctors and find out what's the best treatment to deal with the fibromyalgia. So the Medicare has been a godsend for me.
Libby has a current population of 2,775. The card clinic says that between 2011 and August 2021, they had identified 2,281 people in the area under the age of 65 who qualified for Medicare assistance. So, because of these provisions, thousands of people in Libby have benefited. And reporting from the time makes it seem like a seamless process, despite what critics of Medicare For All would have you believe about inefficient government bureaucracy. An official from the Social Security Administration set up shop around the county and saw 60 people in Libby on their first day in town. A little over a year later, about 600 people had been signed up.
Yeah, it was really simple to get on Medicare. Once you go down to the card clinic, they diagnose you. I just had to fill out paperwork. I believe probably got online and was able to get right on the Medicare.
The system isn't perfect, of course, but the interesting thing was that the part people had the most trouble with was the private insurance aspect. Because for the majority of people, the benefits only pay for Medicare Part A coverage. That's usually stuff like hospital treatments or hospice care. That means other important health factors like doctor's visits or prescription drugs go uncovered unless people buy supplemental insurance, and that can add up.
Do you have supplemental insurance?
Yes, oh yes, I've got Medicare Advantage.
And that's private? You pay for that, right?
Oh, through the nose, yeah. That came through my husband's union insurance. It originally started out free, and it's gone up to $300 a month.
Because I have Part B that is $170 a month, and then I pay for Part G, which is $117 something a month, to pay for what A and B don't pay for.
That's Linda Rodriguez. She was diagnosed with asbestos-related disease about 2 years ago. I caught up with her at the Libby Library while she was running errands in town.
Because $300 a month out of your Social Security is a lot, especially when you have all your regular bills that you have coming in.
And you can get a Humana for $30, $40 a month, but what's it going to cover?
On top of that, coverage is only provided to those actually diagnosed with asbestos-related disease, regardless of how long they might have been exposed. A particular problem for a disease that could take decades to come to full force. But it seems like the people I did talk to like the system and are benefiting from the provisions, but maybe feel like it doesn't go far enough? There's still a costly private insurance component that many still have to deal with. Which reminded me of something Senator Baucus said in our conversation.
You don't worry about bureaucracy. You don't worry about cost-effective analysis. You just do it because otherwise people are going to die.
I mean, that makes sense to me, but I wonder why that can't apply to communities outside of Libby too. So I asked Gayla and Julie and Linda about that.
Our health care is sad compared to other countries. They should take care of more people.
I think Medicare should be for everybody, actually, not just people that are disabled or hit 65 or 62. We should have really good health care in the United States, and we don't. So.
Seriously, I believe in socialized medicine. I'm sorry.
No, you don't have to apologize. I believe it too.
Well, I really do, and I think that's what some people are trying to say.
Senator Baucus has since come around to the idea of Medicare for All.
And I do think that over time, if not Medicare for all, we will as a country move towards some kind of universal coverage. Every other developed country has it as universal coverage, but it's going to take time. It's going to take a long time. Frankly, it's taking longer than I expected.
If we could guarantee healthcare to every resident of Libby dealing with a lethal environmental disaster, why can't the richest nation in the world do the same for every single person in this country dealing with a deadly pandemic on a daily basis? Gayla kind of said it better than I could.
I mean, right now, the few that have insurance are just hanging on by a thread, and the ones that don't hope they don't get sick. Or they're lucky enough to get diagnosed with asbestos-related disease, so they're eligible for Medicare. Now, that's a bullshit deal, but that's basically the way the logic is here right now.
Well,
I mean, it's hard to watch that, but again, we wanted to have you see that because we're very frustrated that people have not necessarily advocated for you guys on behalf of you and the residents of East Palestine for this. And you guys definitely deserve it. And even with what the residents of Libby were saying, it's not perfect. But the idea that this has not been mentioned or even kind of discussed at all, and I'm sure most residents won't even know that, is, I think, really cruel, honestly. And so I just felt like, and I've been screaming at the rafters, like, and Reef knows this because I've been yelling at this for months, like, they need Medicare for all right now, and they need people in their favor to help them fight for this, because what happened to them is not their fault. And so, I mean, just looking at that, what do you guys think? I mean, again, it's a lot to take in, but yeah, I think that kind of speaks to how heinous our politicians are, that this is not even an option right now for you guys, or not even mentioned for you guys to have.
Yeah, I mean, looking at that video, the problem is they don't know what poison even happened to these people based upon the research or lack of that's been done. And so I think the biggest difference between the current situation in East Palestine and Libby is that they knew what poisoned them. And they knew what to look for from a medical standpoint, and doctors were trained on it. And, like, it wasn't anything crazy. And in East Palestine, they don't even know what's out there. The doctors around don't know how to treat for it, or how to diagnose it. And the other piece is there's refusal for labs to even test for some of the things that they do know that are here. And so how can you pass, in current form, how can you pass Medicare for All, because you don't know who would be approved for it or not, based upon the no commonality in symptoms, because God knows what you're going to get.
Now. Yeah. Which again, I think it's kind of ridiculous that you essentially will have to wait years. That's essentially what you're saying. You have to wait years for people to get sick before this is actually a reality.
Well, here's the thing. It doesn't have to be that we're waiting years. That's why we're doing what we're doing.
Right.
It's a matter of the central, I think, issue that is preventing the government from doing anything, or that is causing the government to actually act in the opposite direction of doing anything about this, is that it's East Palestine being poisoned the way it was poisoned, the trains going off the rails, the irresponsibility, the EPA's couple intentional obfuscation, Norfolk Southern denying culpability to the extent that they can. None of that is unusual. The only thing about this entire event that is unusual, and which caused anyone to care that it happened in the first place, is not that millions of pounds of toxic chemicals were put into the air, water, and soil of the Northeast and around the area of East Palestine. The only thing about this event that made it unusual, that made it blow up on social media and then eventually get attention briefly of the corporate media, is that they lit it on fire and caused this gigantic plume that was very dramatic looking of toxic chemicals. That's the only thing that sets this from the thousands of other train derailments and hundreds of other toxic chemical spillages and explosions that happen throughout the United States every single year.
Yeah.
And that is the problem. The central problem for the government in terms of actually getting answers on this is that it raises so many more questions. If the government were to seriously pursue answering the question, what chemicals were produced, how far did they go, and how many people will be impacted by this, it would tell a story of harm and negligence and terroristic corporate practices in terms of chemically polluting the air, water, and soil that people breathe, drink, and eat from, that would harm not just Norfolk Southern. It wouldn't just be Norfolk Southern or this small town. It would be ballooned and become it's already ballooned. So we know it's upstate New York, and people have been getting tested positive for vinyl chloride in their muscles. But if you were to see the actual scope of this problem, it also would bring into stark contrast the scope of the more endemic systemic problem, which is that this is not an unusual event. It's happening everywhere. The level of toxicity, people they don't want people to know or be asking about dioxins, because if people were aware of how toxic it is, and then were aware that it's the EPA's current, apparently the stand they're taking, that dioxins are normal and are just fine everywhere because it's unavoidable, but then they knew how toxic they were, and people were allowed to really know the level of toxicity, what we're talking about for dioxins. There would be a lot of questions that they do not want asked about how these chemicals are, how our entire manufacturing infrastructure works, who it's working for, how we ship products from one place to another, why we ship products from one place to another, what sort of chemicals are being produced, how often they're being leaked into the environment, what's the level of actual physical toxic chemical exposure symptoms that people are experiencing as all types of autoimmune disorders, and how much it is actually being impacted directly by the negligent and just horrifically inefficient and unprofessional and just stupid methods of the current infrastructure. And those are all things that the corporate infrastructure certainly doesn't want, and by extension the government, as it now essentially serves as a servant of that corporate infrastructure, is only serving to make sure that those questions don't get asked. And the only way that we do anything about that is by insisting that we find the answers to those questions. That's why thanks to amazing independent scientists like Professor Welton and his team at Purdue University, who have been doing the work to actually address the problem. And by addressing the problem, we can then see what the problem actually is and work out a plan for that.